Awesome to welcome Ohio University head coach Jeff Boals to the podcast. Coach Boals is coming off a successful season in which Ohio won the MAC conference, beat Virginia in the NCAA tournament before losing to Creighton in the round of 32. Prior to Ohio, Boals spent 3 seasons as head coach at Stony Brook University and 7 years as an assistant coach for the Ohio State Buckeyes under Thad Matta. Coach Boals, welcome to the podcast.
Chris, thanks for having me. Long-time listener, first time on here, and very, very appreciative of you inviting me.
Absolutely, Coach. Long overdue, and many people wouldn't know, but our connection goes back to when you're an assistant at Ohio State, and you guys brought your team to play at Windsor. And the part that I remember most and we'll talk about how good you guys were, but that you guys stayed in cabins, and that was the only team that did that, and it was a really cool concept.
It was a crazy story. So we ended up staying up in the tomato capital of the world, right?
Leamington.
Yeah, and we bussed up there, and we had 3 cabins, and it was right on the water, right on Lake Erie, and it was like midnight when we got there. And Coach Matta gave a flashlight to the seniors and said, "Hey, go find your room." 5 minutes later, gave a flashlight to the juniors, said, "Go find your room. Underclassmen, go find your room." So the coaches had 1 cabin and the players had 2 cabins. And, the cell phone service was not very good and expensive. And I think our guys went back to their childhood. They were playing like Capture the Flag and, playing the piano, doing their own karaoke. And it was just an awesome trip.
And how good you guys were. We were fortunate. We got to host a lot of teams on their foreign tours. And, we played Kentucky, Virginia Tech, a lot of mid to low majors as well. But yours was by far the best team we ever played. And as I say to coaches, I explain it to say that your players had counters to the counters. And it was just incredible to be able to watch. And of course, you tell a story about Evan Turner in that trip as well.
Yeah, so going into that trip, Evan Turner had never played the point guard. And, we didn't really have a point guard coming back. So Thad basically said, put the ball in his hands and said, "Hey, look, you're a point guard." And it was different because we used the 24-second shot clock. So when teams don't prepare for that, it's a completely different game than a 35-second shot clock, 30-second shot clock. It ends up being transition, pick and roll, and his vision was really, really good, and Thad just was really, really good at giving confidence and belief, and that's one thing I really got from him, and he instilled that in Evan, and he had a phenomenal year that year.
Tremendous year and tremendous team. And we're going to talk about some of the things that you do to instill confidence and get into a whole bunch of things. Obviously, tremendous season. But one of the cool articles that I read was about your group chat with your 1993-94 team and that you get involved with throughout the season. I thought that was a real cool concept that coaches can kind of steal that idea as well.
Yeah, I think when you play college basketball or any college sport, really, you have a bond, an immediate fraternity per se, and when you win a championship, you're bonded for life. That's something that can never be taken away from you. And normally you have your reunions, but it's a special moment that you shared with a group of guys that you blood, sweat, tears, everything with. And we have our group chat going, and I mean every single day, it's all day long. And you would think some guys didn't work, by the way, and the amount of responses, but nobody's safe in that group chat. And it's just like yesterday, we're on a bus trip, to Eastern Michigan, or, in the locker room, everyone gets cracked on and no one's safe. And, me included, we're going through the MAC tournament, and, my guys are questioning why I did this, why I didn't do this. And it's a good way to keep you humble.
Definitely keep you humble. Now, this has come up in the past few podcasts as well. And I'm curious, do you have a group of mentors or coaches that you keep in touch with in a similar way to that as well?
Yeah, not near to that extent, but I think, anybody who coaches, you want to have, a mentor or multiple mentors. And, a lot of times it could be an assistant coach you play for, it could be a administrator, the head coaches. And I've been very, very fortunate, Chris, to have worked with and for a lot of great head coaches. Mark Schmidt at St. Bonaventure, Thad Matta, Keith Dambrot, Jason G, Greg White, and then my head coach, Larry Hunter, who got me into the profession. And I've been very fortunate that way. And, Larry Hunter was that for me, kind of going through the early phases. And, now, working for Thad for 7 years, I talk to him every single week. And he's been a great mentor, consultant for me, bouncing ideas off of him and just, great mentorship.
An assistant coach, Matt Klein, who is a former assistant coach at Eastern Michigan, mentioned to me in preparing to the podcast that he just thought that you guys were such an excellent passing team. And I guess the curious question comes up about how you work on that and how you develop that. And certainly having watched your team play a number of times this year, I really enjoyed the ball movement.
Yeah, I think obviously it helps when you have really good point guards, to kind of set the tone, to facilitate. But it's funny you say that because I was at Peach Jam with Thad one time, and Doc Rivers was there. And, Thad asked Doc, he said, "Hey, like, what do you guys do? What passing drills do you do? Because, you guys pass the ball so well." And this is when he was at the Celtics. And he said, "We don't do any passing drills." He's like, "But what we do is we just accentuate every assistant coach, perfect pass, perfect pass." He's like, "We're paying Ray Allen $14 million to catch and shoot. He's got to have a perfect pass." He's like, "Now, some guys you don't want to shoot. You don't mind if it's a bad pass where they got to catch it and, bring it down. But, it's one thing we do passing drills, but we really, really accentuate and talk about perfect pass every single time. And, if it's not perfect, we'll kind of start the drill over until they do, just to get their minds thinking."
So it's really an emphasis more than anything in terms of that. And I'm wondering, do you connect any of that to analytics or anything for your players to be able to understand the importance?
Yeah, I like analytics. I'm not the end all be all in analytics, but I think, when you show them film, right, where, hey, if this pass wasn't here, but it was here, he could have got that shot off, and that would have been the best shot we got in that possession. So I think just really showing the guys, the importance of it and drilling it, where, hey, look, sometimes we do throw bad passes, to catch and shoot in our shooting drills, just so, they're used to it. But, we really more emphasize it and show film to kind of, back our thought process up.
So by saying that, you're saying that some of the drills that you go into, the constraint is that you have to throw a bad pass so they get used to catching a bad pass?
Yeah, sometimes in our shooting drills, we'll tell our coaches to throw it high, throw it low, because it's not going to be perfect every single time. And it's more, getting your feet right, trying to get your balance back, getting your momentum going forward. So we do practice that as well.
Yeah, that's great. That's such a great point and great concept to be able to emphasize. And I know some coaches sometimes shy away from doing things like that because they think now you're saying it's okay to throw a bad pass, but players are smart enough to know the difference, right?
Yeah, especially when we do our passing drills is where we really, talk about it. And I think, the way the game's played, and I'm a big believer in next play mentality. And, the game of basketball, let's say 70 possessions in a game, there's so many possessions going on, so many things happening where you can't slow down. And I played for coaches before where they stop you every single time you make a mistake to correct it and do it again. And I just don't think, my personal belief is, that's not the game of basketball. You got to learn to play through your mistakes. So it's going to happen. And, when it does happen, you have to make the best of it and try to correct it.
Well, and that's something that we're going to dive into here is the next play mentality and the growth mindset. So let's start with next play mentality. What are some things that you do to build that for your players?
I think, I think it's a skill, to be honest with you. I think, certain guys have it, certain guys don't. And when you come into a situation where guys make mistakes and they get pulled out of the game, right? So the first thing they do is, they roll their head, they throw their palms up. And I remember my first, one of my first practices when I was at Stony Brook, when I got the job. We were working out, and my point guard goes in there and gets fouled. There's a no call. He misses the layup, so he puts his head down, runs back down the court. Doesn't say a word. And then we come back down. The other team scores, and then my point guard's still mad about not getting the call, so he goes down to the corner. So now my wing has to bring the ball up, throws the ball to my center, who travels. And he loses his mind, goes absolutely nuts. And I'm just like looking at this, like, what are we doing? So I blow the whistle and, hey, teachable moment, right? So I kind of go back through the whole play. Like, let's go back to the layup. You got fouled. Like, I saw it. It was a no call. But you have to play through that. Now since you pouted and, didn't get the basketball, our center travels and he loses his mind. And our first game was against Maryland, I believe, that year. And I'm like, what are we going to do when we play Maryland? 16,000 people, Big Ten refs. So really just talking about it, when scenarios happen, teachable moments, I call them. But really getting to understand, like, I don't care if you miss a shot. I care if you're ready to shoot the second shot. I don't care if you turn the ball over. I care if you sprint back on defense to try to get the ball back. So really just, emphasizing, like, hey, look, as the head coach, I'm okay if this happens. It's done. It's past. It's over. We got to worry about the next thing. And I really believe it's a skill. So we really try to work on that. Sometimes I'll do drills and I'll tell our assistant coaches to, not call fouls or, put the team in a situation where there's an adverse, situation that they have to play through.
So this is awesome. And I totally agree. It's a skill you can build. And, part of it is obviously creating the environment for it to happen. And we know mistakes are part of the game. So normalizing that, which you've talked about as well. So then I'm wondering the next step, what are some coping strategies that you give to the players or that you emphasize to the players to be able to actually handle it? And as in that example, one, it might be just awareness to start, but what else do you do to give them coping strategies?
Yeah, I think it's almost a learned behavior, right? You grow up. Like I said, certain coaches might pull you out of the game if you make mistakes. So that's constantly in your mind. You're looking over your shoulder. Sometimes it's a defense mechanism, right? Where you might miss a layup and claim there's a foul, but there's not a foul. So I think really just emphasizing it, drilling it. And it's an everyday deal with us of really just preaching, hey, next play. And even when, like when Evan Turner played, he was such a perfectionist and he was so much better than everybody else. Like he'd make a play and throw a pass where the guy should have been, but the guy wasn't there because Evan saw something that he didn't see, and he would sometimes lose his mind. And Thad just had a great way of connecting with him, like, hey, look, it's okay. It's okay. But that was kind of his personality and who he was. And, so really just, talking about it, emphasizing it and preaching it. And, when scenarios rise up, we call them teachable moments, and really giving them the confidence and belief, like, hey, as a head coach, it's okay if you do this, but it's not okay if you, follow it up with another mistake.
Do you actually use the phrase in teachable moments with your players so that they understand?
Yeah, we do. I think, you want to, it's a reaction game, right? There's so many different things that happen. And, I'm at fault. I think a lot of head coaches are at fault. They want to control everything. And, we run a lot of set plays, a lot of horns actions. It's, European NBA stuff. This year, I want to try to focus on more playing basketball and giving them concepts. But I think for us, it's, giving them the confidence and belief to be able to make a play and not be afraid to make a play. And if you do make a mistake, don't worry about it. Keep playing and play through it.
Well, I love that. And I love connecting learning language for players. When we use intentional learning language like that, teachable moments, it's great. I'm curious then, what changes do you see in a player as they build this ability to be able to move on to the next play? Do you ever talk to them about some of the differences from the beginning of the year, say to the end of the year in terms of this?
Yeah, definitely. I think, when it does happen, and as a coach, you sit there, educate and you teach and you preach and you show film. And then when it does happen the right way, it kind of validates everything you've worked on. And, like anything, you want to get positive feedback. So you might pull a player over, or you might show them the clip on film. You might do it in front of everybody to reinforce, like, hey, look, 2 weeks ago, Billy would have stopped playing. Look here, boom, perfect. Turns the ball over, doesn't put his palms up, doesn't, look at his teammate and gesture. He just turns, runs back, takes a charge, or, gets a block shot. So I think really, I guess putting them in a situation where they feel good about it and that the good things have happened.
Well, you can see that certainly in terms of how your team played down the stretch, that they played this way. They played with that next play mentality. And you mentioned the NBA and you mentioned spacing and European concepts a little bit. Just curious, maybe from the NBA perspective, what are some things that you've taken from the NBA that fit into what you do?
Yeah, they're college and NBA are two completely different games. But I think from a standpoint of the spacing and really just playing basketball, I think you look at the 5-man, right? You call it the throw and go or the get action, where I think Steph Curry or Brad Beal or somebody started it, where you're hitting the 5-man and you're playing off each other and you're setting screens. And we've had some 5-men this year. We had a kid who was, I think, top 5 in the country in field goal percentage. He was more of a block player, but he's really worked on expanding his game, shooting threes, being more comfortable in the perimeter. And I think next year we'll be able to do some things where he pops up, we hit him. We got guard cutting movement off the ball and screening actions. Where it's more habit or just kind of happens organically, where guys make certain reads. And like I told you before, I'm almost to a fault. Sometimes you want to control everything. You want to control shots. And there were times this year, my point guard and my 4-man, Jason Preston, Ben Vanderplas, especially when we played Illinois, I wouldn't call a set. My assistant would be like, hey, let those two figure it out. They'll play a 2-man game and they'll figure it out. So I think, the older team you have and the more you coach them, you're going to trust them more, but you still got to teach those concepts and let them play. And no mistakes are going to happen.
Even with such a tremendous season, you're still looking for a better way. And I'm curious if that's dictated a little bit by you now having more time in the program with certain players, or is that just philosophically that you see this opportunity to be able to go to more conceptual type offense?
I think a little bit of both. When they're running a lot of sets and, teams are starting to switch everything more, right, and make you play basketball. They'll guard, ball screens a certain way, not let you come off and keep you on one side of the floor, icing them. So I think, when you run set, and, we run our 4-out 1-in flow offense, for our secondary flow. But I think if you really just teach some concepts of playing basketball, it's going to take away all the switching. You can work against it in practice. I think a lot of it has to do with going into year 3. We have some veteran guys who are you trust. So I think it's a little bit of both.
Well, I love this, and I didn't expect to go here, but it so makes sense in a way, the way that you're phrasing it. And I've said this before on the podcast, is going from this structure to unstructure, that it's okay. It doesn't have to be all of one or all of the other. It's a blend, basically, as you progress this.
Yeah, and I think, if you do something like that, sometimes it allows you to play your 5 best players, and, Thad was always big on that. Like, hey, find a way to get your best 5 guys on the floor. And part of that was us moving Evan to the point guard, just letting him figure it out and our guys figure it out. But, there's got to be a trust involved, and, there's got to be some teaching concepts involved. And, that'll happen through reps. That'll happen through film, showing what we did right, what we did wrong. We'll clip up NBA games. I'll clip up European tape of, kind of showing them, what we want to do, how we want to do it, just so they get an idea in a sense, knowing it's not going to be perfect, but it'll give them a visual to, kind of hang on to and see what we want to do.
Well, that's great stuff. And they must enjoy connecting it to the NBA, especially in terms of seeing opportunities for them to do similar things.
Yeah, it's always easier, when you pull up a clip of, Jason Tatum doing it, they kind of focus in a little bit more. And, there's, I'll call some of my side out of bounds and underneath or, set plays after the NBA teams that run them, just so our guys understand, like, hey, I got this from the Clippers. And, we ran, against Virginia after, late game, we ran Clippers and it worked to a T. And, my guys are over pointing to the bench like, yeah, I remember that play. And so it's good to, because they focus a little bit more when it's NBA driven.
So you mentioned the Virginia game, and that leads into another topic that I know is near and dear to you, and that's this growth mindset and this mentality that comes with it. So maybe first, just let's focus on the Virginia game. Going into that type of game, your players had no doubt they could win, I imagine, going into that game.
Yeah, we had a lot of confidence, especially with the way we played the MAC tournament. I think, out of 120 minutes, we led for 117 in 3 games. And, the whole week it was kind of like everyone was talking about Virginia being on a pause, and they were talking to the wrong coach and the wrong program, because we had played 3 games in, I think, 38 days, went through a 21-day pause, got our last 2 regular season games canceled. And my starting two guard was 10-day contact trace quarantine heading into the MAC tournament. Literally comes over and shoots for about 30 minutes on Wednesday, gets on the bus, goes to Cleveland, has 18 points the next day. So, we were on high alert. They had been working out individually, not as a team. It's not like they were locked up in the dorms or apartments, but our guys had a ton of confidence going in that game. And I think it started with the Illinois game, at the start of the year. That was our third game in 3 days. I think they were ranked top 5 at the time. Had some great players, and we feel like we should have won that game, but we were right there at the end. And I think that game really catapulted us and gave us the confidence to know we can compete with them. And now we had to execute, because obviously Virginia is Virginia, and they're phenomenal defensively. They're more efficient offensively this year than they've ever been. And our guys made plays down the stretch when they needed to.
I imagine there'll be some really unique stories continuing to come out from this season from coaches and players and everything that I know you guys experienced, including the Cleveland State game, which again, you have all these outlier, really weird situations that happened all year, and the resiliency that your team showed this year, obviously down the stretch, and to get it right at the right time is part of the process that I know you emphasize, isn't it?
Yeah, it's, our goal, we have a simple goal: be closer as a team, be better as a team every single day. And, it sounds very, bland, but, we really try to do that. And if you go back to starting, like we talked about before, we use the equation E+R = O. And we kept on talking like, hey, at some point we're going to get hit by this COVID, whether it's our team or whoever. And we went 7 months without anything. Like our guys were here in July last summer doing workouts, and it was different for everybody, but we went 7 months. And then we ended up taking someone who had been hurt on a road trip to Central Michigan. He ended up talking to a high school buddy of his that he grew up with, and the next thing you know, their kid tests positive, our kid tests positive, and then it was like boom, boom, boom. It was a wave. And but we kept on talking like, hey, at some point it's going to happen. How are we going to respond? Right? We got to be positive. We got to control what we can control. We got to do what we can, and we're going to come out of this, better on the other side. So I think it was a matter of belief and confidence and making sure everyone was healthy. Obviously, because we had multiple guys doing it. But when we came back, we didn't have 10 guys back at the same time to be able to practice. So we came back, and I called Michigan because they went through a 14-day break. Theirs was different because they didn't have anybody test positive or contact traced, but they didn't do anything. So we tried to structure it to build our guys back up, conditioning wise, practice wise, timing wise. But we didn't practice 5v5 heading into our first game against Akron. And in that game, we didn't have Jason Preston, we didn't have Dwight Wilson. And I remember talking to Coach Matta, and he's like, hey, whatever you do, give your team as much confidence as they can. And that's kind of where the last probably 3 weeks of the season, I said, hey, go play with uber superior ultra confidence. If you're open, shoot the ball. Don't think twice about it. And we ended up winning that game by double figures. And so I think really the way we preach and talk, and it's an overused word, but the culture, right? The positivity, control what you can. How are you going to respond to being on a long layoff? I think really, got us through, the pause that we had.
It's great stuff. And going back to that equation, I want you to build on that a little bit. I know we talked about it a little bit with Corey Close from UCLA Women's Basketball on that podcast, but can you go through that equation a little bit? Because I think it's such a cool thing and an easy way to connect the dots for people.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm sure people have done it, but Tim and Brian Kite, Focus 3, they do a phenomenal job, and they started working with Urban Meyer, I think, back in 2014. And going through and seeing Ohio State football and the way they did things, and listening to it for years, I've always been intrigued by it. And from day one when I got my head coaching job, I used that equation, put it on shirts, put it on in our locker room, and E is the event, which they say 95% of the time you don't control the event that happens to you. And I use this a lot with recruits. We'll talk about, hey, if you go 1 for 12 shooting in a game, that's the event. What's your response going to be? You're going to shoot more. You're going to get extra reps up. You're going to watch tape. You're shooting bad shots, contested shots. Is your footwork bad? Then the outcome's going to be different next time. And I'll say, hey, you get a 68 on a math test, right? That's the event. What's your response going to be? You're going to go see the teacher, professor. You're going to get a tutor. You're going to study harder next time. The outcome is going to be different next time. So we really talk about, response. There was a game this year we lost to Kent State, and we got hammered on the boards, and we had a quick turnaround. And like the NBA, we did our practice through film, and we really had a heart to heart. And it was like, hey, look, we gave up 18 offensive rebounds. That's the event. What's our response going to be? Okay. We went through and we charted every attempt to block out, every missed block out, every opportunity to block out. Here's your percentage. You didn't block out 67% of the time, 63%, 58%. And we lost the game by doing that. So our response has to be, different. And from that game on, we started charting everything, practicing games, those rebounding opportunities, the attempts to block out, the missed blockouts, and our rebounding was way better, throughout the last 3 weeks of the year.
Well, it's great connecting the dots for players as well with these, a little bit of analytics or a little bit of quantifying it to be able to go with this equation. E+R equals O, and just such a simple way to be able to phrase it. I imagine your players enjoyed that.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, like once they can see, right, that they're not doing it or they are doing it, it's easier for them to comprehend. And when you sit there and say, okay, if you give up 18 offensive rebounds, and statistically, whatever you get out rebounded by, it's 1 point per, rebound. We lost by 10 points. So if we cut this down, we cut our turnovers down where we make 48% of our shots. You win this game by 6 points or whatever it may be. So you want to kind of have them be able to relate to it and understand why we're doing what we're doing, and the carryover was there, which is good.
Well, it gives life to really an abstract concept, which is what you originally started this whole thing with, which is the next play mentality, right?
Yeah, and I think it all ties in because, everyone's got egos, everyone's got their defense mechanisms, and, it's like you have to figure out each individual, right? Everyone's different. And I think everyone learns differently. So you have to, some guys we have to put them through and walk them through something somebody can show on a tape and they can visually see it. Somebody you have to just tell them what to do and they'll do it. So you got to figure out how to do it, the right way, so everybody is on the same page.
Well, what are some other things, Coach, that you do to build this growth mindset within your program? The simple thing from obviously the takeaway for many of us from the Carol Dweck work is obviously praising effort over outcome. Is that part of it for you?
Yeah, it's when I got the Stony Brook job, it was the first time they'd ever been in the NCAA tournament, and the starting unit was gone, and there were role players that were coming back. So going in, my mentality was going to be like, look, I'm going to have a growth mindset. I'm not going to be worried about results. It's going to be a process every day. Control what we can. If we lose, let's figure out why we lose and continue to work on it. And if you go back, every coach is different, right? 10 years ago, you might take losses completely different, right? You hang on to it. And, that year, I didn't let the losses affect me in a way. Like, I might look at some things I would have done differently, which, what we can talk about. But I think I was worried about, okay, we didn't do this. We need to get better at that. Even if we won, right? It's better to learn from winning than it is to learn from losing, because you can learn the same things. But, just what do we need to keep working on to get better? And really having that bigger picture mentality of, hey, our league's going to come down to three games in March anyway. So let's just continue to get better every single day, continue to work on the things we can, control what we can, and not worry about it. So, when I got the job at Stony Brook, 2 kids got arrested the night of my interview, and they didn't tell me until after my press conference. And I'm like, okay, welcome to Division I head coaching. Here we go. And it was one kid was graduating, one was the toughest returning player. Three weeks later, my best returning player got arrested, twice in 3 weeks, and obviously those guys were gone. So we were picked 7th out of 9 in the league that year, and we finished 2nd. And I really believe it was just the process, the mentality of wanting to get better, and not taking the losses and going crazy. It was more just, hey, look, here's what we did wrong. Let's continue to work on it and get better. And so I think that's kind of where it came from, and it's carried through everywhere I've been.
Well, this matter of fact positivity that you have and you're talking about is so effective, and yet it's just not cool to talk about it, is it? Like coaches want all the buzzwords and all the phrases and stuff, but really it's the simple things like you're talking about that make the difference, isn't it?
Yeah, I think, as a coach, you're judged and based on wins and losses and championships, right? But I think, you know, everyone's like, hey, look, be you when you get your first head coaching job. Don't be Thad Matta, don't be Keith Dambrot. You're going to take bits and pieces what you liked and didn't like, but you have to be yourself. And when you're making every decision, it affects winning and losing, right? You'll take it a little bit harder. But I think that's one of the cool things about it. Like it's on you. So, there's nobody that, wants your son to play better than the head coach because my livelihood depends on it. And just really trying to figure it out on an individual basis, on a team basis, what to do, how to do it, when to do it, and have that duration because it's a long year. I mean, you look at, when I played, you didn't have summer school, you didn't have individual workouts in summer. You had to get better on your own, right? You had to find a place to go lift, and it was almost like that in the pandemic last, spring and summer. Guys had to find their own way, and I think now it's such a long year. It's year round. You got to have fun doing it. Thad was always big on fresh minds and fresh legs, and not overdoing things. And you look at the Ivy League. Ivy League doesn't have summer basketball. They don't see their kids until start of school, and works out pretty good for them. So I think the pandemic has taught us a lot about coaching and kind of going back to some things maybe that you thought were negative, but could be a positive.
Yeah, it's such a great point. I'm so curious to see how, when it does get back to normal, how some coaches have changed based on what they went through in terms of some of those things. And one of those things being, we don't need the volume that we think we need for players, do we?
No, I mean, you go back to, we had a 21-day layoff, like, pretty much 14 where we didn't do anything, right? And then certain guys came back and we had 6 guys on day 1, 8 guys on day 2, 8 guys on day 3, got up to 9 guys on day 5. And then, 10 days on, 10 guys on day 6 where we played on day 7. So, who's to say that long layoff didn't help us, right? Heading into, the conference tournament, our guys might've been fresher, right? And as a coach, you feel like you're, not ready or, but then it goes into trusting your team and trusting your players and trying to figure it out in a short amount of time. And, we won 2 of our 3 games and then, steamrolled through the MAC tournament, heading into the NCAA tournament. So I think there's a lot to be, said for that and kind of go back and reflect on, what you went through.
Well, and I'm curious, I mean, from your perspective as well, it probably taught you how to relax into some of these things that you don't control and that you can still figure it out, right? And that's got to be a huge lesson for you and other coaches.
Yeah. And I always go back to, like, I'm super positive, right? All we worry about is effort level, really not what happens, but how hard you're playing through mistakes, next play mentality. And it's almost like there was no pressure, right? It was kind of fun to, you're down your starting point guard, your starting center. There's some guys that came in that hadn't played all year, stepped up and that showed me, things. And I think, when you're in that situation and you're really expected to lose, you kind of go in there with a different attitude of, really just being positive, playing hard and giving guys confidence.
As a self-described positive coach, what is the process for you when you need to challenge players in some context to do something differently? Is it conversational? Is it transactional, transformational? How do you approach it?
Yeah, it depends on who it is, right? And what you want to get through. Sometimes you have to know that if you call a guy out in front of the whole team, it's going to be an adverse, deal. It's going to be worse than what it was going in. But there's sometimes that you have to get on the whole team, and that might be just more of a mentality thing or a focus deal or an effort, deal. I think individually it might be if someone's making continuous mistakes or not seeing what they should see, or if it's a leader, having to talk more, play harder. So I think it's all individually based, and then sometimes as a team. And I remember Jason Preston. Everyone had those electronic whistles, right? So Jason Preston passed up whatever shot because he's a pass first guy and always wants to pass, but we're trying to get him to shoot more, and he passed up a shot for maybe the 3rd time, and I just took my whistle and slammed it down, shattered into pieces, and I was mad at myself after the fact, but it's like for him to, pass up a shot, it was hurting our team. Like, we want you to shoot. And sometimes he felt selfish, but it's like, hey, look, you're the best player on our team, right? They're not going to care if you shoot 20 times a game because it's an open shot. You're shooting 40% from three. Like, it'd be different. So I think it's all, based on scenarios and reads and really what you want to, as a head coach, want to emphasize and get through, to your team.
Well, it's been part of the generosity of coaches like yourself who have done this podcast to be able to do some self-reflection and share. And you mentioned this already, things that you would do different. And I know you shared one of them with me when you went from being first-year head coach, but I'm curious if you can share some other things with us in terms of, well, that thing, and then some other things with us about, talk to me about some of the things you reflected on and have figured out.
Yeah. One of the biggest things, the amount of decisions you make as a head coach are astronomical. And, it's to the point where you come home and, you ask your wife or kids, what do you want for dinner? And you're like, I don't care. I don't want to make that decision. But, the biggest thing was not being prepared for, close games. I was not ready for that. And maybe after the third close game, I'm talking about 1-2 possessions, right? Where, it's coming down the stretch and, you either have a timeout, don't have a timeout. And, after that point, I went back and just looked at all the tape and said, okay, we're running these two plays, these two underneath out of bounds plays, these two side out of bounds plays. If we have a timeout, here's a package we can run. If we don't have a timeout, we're going to run one of the two plays that we, are going to work on. So different scenarios like that. I remember my first time out, Chris, it was like, boom, timeout, 30-second. Before I think I said one word, the first horn went. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm not ready for this. And, it's things you got to practice, right? Drawing up plays on the board, maybe getting a stopwatch, because you have to know what you're going to say, what you're going to do before you even call the timeout. And, so I think that was really different, from that standpoint of being a head coach and, being the guy running everything. And, when I was at Ohio State, I was our defensive coordinator. So I wasn't really engrossed in the offense as much. I saw a lot of other offenses, but it's not like you're thinking about plays and drawing plays up. And I think that's really where, your assistants come into play. I have some great assistants, and we do it like we did Ohio State. I have an offensive guy, defensive guy. And, those coaches are always thinking like, hey, run, 2/, right? And then you might call out 2/, or there might be something you want to run. But, your staff's invaluable in those situations because everything happens so quickly.
I remember this decision-making fatigue. It's such a real thing. And I remember finally later in my coaching career having a conversation with my wife about it and how much that improved our relationship, to be honest, because now she kind of understood that I wasn't indifferent. I just literally was okay if she just led and made the decisions that weren't to do with my basketball program.
Yeah. And I saw a great thing because, you have so many things, compliance, housing, recruiting, locker room, travel, everything that goes into it. And, somebody told me one time, like, if it doesn't impact winning, like, don't make the decision. Right. And, if it's like, you want to put the patch on the left side or the right side, like, let someone else figure that out.
Who cares?
Because you have so many other important decisions to make where, it's like your brain is always processing. So, I try to do that. And, one of the other worst things I was not very good at was delegating. And I think as an assistant coach, right, you're in charge of certain things and you do certain things, and you might not have the GAs or the managers that are accessible and want to help. So when I became a head coach, it was hard for me to delegate, to give guys responsibility to do certain things. And, now I feel comfortable, right? I've had a couple guys with me on my staff for 4 years, and you feel good about telling them what to do and trusting them to do it. But delegating was hard for me as well.
So back to the close games scenario then, and then obviously improving this. Can you give us, like, what are some things that you did? You talked about timing your plays or timing your timeouts in terms of diagramming them. But are there other things that you did within practice or within film that helped you improve that?
Well, I'll never forget this, and I'm still kicking myself. And I said I would never do it again, but I did it. So we played Loyola, Maryland. We're down 1 with 7 seconds to go. They're going full court. and their best player, we end up turning them, twice, but he ended up getting to the rim, throws the ball up on the rim, rolls around, bounces, drops in, game over. We lose by 1. So I was always like, I'm not going to let the best player beat me, right? I'm going to double team him. Well, go back to the Illinois game, 7 seconds to go. I end up calling a timeout to set our defense up. And Ayo Dosunmu comes off, half-court ball screen, gets to the rim, makes a layup with like 1.2 seconds to go. And to this day, I'm absolutely kicking myself that I was in that situation, 4 years prior. And I told myself I would never let the best player beat me, and we did it. So, you work on, things offensively and defensively, right? Do you foul up 3? What time do you foul up 3? And for me, it's not going to be an exact thing. Like, we're going to do this every single time. I think it'll be a game feel, a time feel, what type of team we have, who's on the court. But it's completely different. You got to work on all avenues: offense, defense, underneath, out of bounds. We had a game against Maine. We were down 1. They had the ball with 1.2 seconds to go, going full court, and we had no timeouts left. Well, they ended up throwing a deep home run pass that went out of bounds. No one touched it. So we had the ball down 1 underneath our own basket, 1.2 seconds, and we ran 3 up. One of the specialty plays that we practiced. And we ran it, double back screen, lob, get the ball right at the rim, foul, make 2 free throws, and we won the game. So I think just, every scenario you can think of to try to make your team as prepared as possible and really give them confidence to go through it. So when they're in that situation, it's kind of, second nature to them.
Well, and the hard part is to evaluate it independent of the outcome, isn't it? Because sometimes you could feel still, even after the fact, that you did the right thing, and it might not lead to the right outcome. And the only people that are right are us basketball coaches on Twitter that can obviously question everything after the fact, right?
Yeah, one thing I really like is watching the end of close NBA games, right, where they can advance the ball, and there's always going to be some type of, quick hitter off a side out of bounds. And, I love watching Popovich, right? I mean, he's got a million plays, and, I know Base Diop, who are recruited, that's on that team, and sometimes afterwards I'll be like, hey, is that what you're looking for? He's like, no, so-and-so, messed it up, or, hey, Pop didn't run that one. He let the assistant draw it up. But they can execute it, get a great look and miss it. But, it was like, hey, that's what you wanted. You got the shot you wanted in that situation. So I really enjoy watching those, close, games because there's so many side out of bounds, situations.
I'm curious, is there much of an appetite from the college men's game in advancing the ball in the last 2 minutes?
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting, right? It would make games a lot more interesting. And
I do too, yeah.
It's like you look at, the women's game, they do it, and the men's game, is the only team that has halves still in the world. So I think there's some things that would definitely, make the game more exciting and put some, I guess, X and O, mentality into it as opposed to just, some luck with a half court shot or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what happens there. I know another thing is that you're huge on competing in practice. Can you frame that for us, our understanding of how you guys compete in practice?
Yeah, so some of the best players have been around: D'Angelo Russell, Evan Turner, Jared Sullinger, those guys. When you do a drill, right? And sometimes they'd be like, why are we doing this drill? Or they kind of just go through the drill to do the drill. But if you did that same drill and put a point system to it, right, it's game on. It's like the competitive nature kicks in, winner, loser, the most competitive guys hate to lose. So when you put that aspect into it, the drill becomes that much better. You get more out of it that way. We'll do, in the summertime, we'll do a lot of competition stuff. We'll do, normally we would end with scrimmaging, most every workout. And it could be, a 1-game series, a 3-game series, a best of 5, best of 7. It could be first one to score wins, best of 7. It could be first one to 3 wins, where you have to guard the 3-point line, and those games happen quick. But it really talks or teaches them the intensity, right, competitiveness, and the value of every single possession. Where it's like, as a coach, you might lose by 1 at the buzzer, but you might have had 3 straight turnovers in the first 10 minutes of the game where you didn't get a shot off, that's just as important as that last, shot that the other team hit. So, that was one thing that, Thad was big on competing. I go to some football practices at Ohio State football. Urban Meyer, that's all he was about. Compete, compete, compete. And he didn't care if you're a fifth year senior or freshman. The better guy was going to play. And, his mindset was if somebody comes in, right, you want them to respect everybody in your program, but compete in classroom, weight room, one-on-one, shooting drills, 5v5, whatever it may be. And if you come in and compete, you might elevate everybody, right? Or you're going to bypass people. And, we want our guys competing in everything they do.
So awesome, and awesome to hear the Urban Meyer example. So what are some things that within your program you guys do in terms of consequences or noticing winning or losing in terms of helping your players understand that they won or lost?
Yeah, in the summer when we do structure, we chart every win and loss per player. And it's amazing at the end of the summer, who ends up winning and who the losing people are. And we stat everything. We do, Sean Miller did it at Arizona. It was the gold standard, right? Where everything's got a, plus and minus to it. Turnover, rebound, assist, missed free throw, missed three, made three, whatever it may be. And, we'll do that daily. We'll do it weekly, and then we'll do a cumulative deal. And it's amazing, the better players tend to end up winning and have a higher Bobcat standard point total. But it really gives them a visual to see, right? Man, I've lost that many games. So in their mind, coming in the next day and competing even harder. Or like, man, I don't want to be on a losing team. Sometimes I'll take the five, top five and the bottom five and play them against each other. Sometimes I'll take the top guy in the bottom four and put them together, where Jason Preston's got four guys who've lost and say, hey, look, you got to carry these guys today. So we'll mix it up like that just to, try to get it as competitive as we can. And sometimes, you might have the same two teams, best of seven series to 7 points. There's some smack talking going on. It's a 4-3 series, and they'll be like, hey, put the same teams tomorrow as they were today. We want another crack at these guys. And, that's the most competitive guys. They hate losing. So you may never end the drill. Like, come on, run it back. New 7-game series. That's what you want, guys with that mentality.
And also, like, to connect it back to your next play mentality again, it's almost impossible to get game transfer of coping strategies or this next play mentality, growth mindset, whatever you want to call it, unless you are doing it every day in practice. And this competing allows you to emphasize that and teach that and coach that every day in practice, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, I'm sure I heard it on your podcast about playing more 5v5 drills, right? The 3v3, the 4v4, so when I heard that podcast, I started doing more 5v5 stuff, more game, simulated, situations. And, I think it just helps the overall, program individually, teaches them winning, losing does matter. There's consequences to losing, whether it might be, you put everyone in line and run them free throw line and back, whatever it may be, something simple, one push-up, but there's a consequence to losing. And I think if you go to the like rebounding drills and, if you, whatever you want to emphasize, right, you can change the point system to emphasize offensively or defensively, whatever you want to get through in that drill. And I think the guys really just, focus that much more when there's points on the board.
But they also enjoy it more, don't they?
Yeah, it becomes spirited, right? And that's what you want. And it's almost like we do the kill drill, right, where you got to get 3 stops in a row before you can get out. And when you get to 2 stops and somebody gives up a layup, and then 2 stops and someone gives up a wide open jump shot because they didn't rotate, now guys start talking more, right? They get on each other more, hold each other more accountable. And I think today's kid, like nobody wants to piss anyone off. Right, the peer accountability is not there like it should be or what it was. And it's like, hey, look, you can't take it personal when he tells you you have to block him out because you gave up a game-winning, offensive rebound putback. All he's trying to do is win. And so I think when you go in those scenarios with the points and there's more on the line, guys start talking more and communicating more.
Another thing that you shared with me is your list of non-negotiables. And what I love about this conversation and talking about it is I think coaches are, again, understanding that you can't have 100 non-negotiables. You can't have all this whole list of non-negotiables. You need to really, really narrow it down to what is most important in terms of the non-negotiables. So can you share those with us?
Yeah, so I'll start with the what we look for in a recruit. Number one is high character guys. We want guys to do the right thing on and off the floor. The second thing is I want guys who love the game of basketball that want to be pros, and they're going to be in the gym extra, watching extra tape, taking care of their bodies, getting the sleep that they need. And then the third thing is young men serious about earning their degree. And I was a biology major. I took organic chemistry, neuroanatomy, cell chem, physiologies, anatomies. If I knew I was going to coach, I probably wouldn't have been a biology major, but I want to be a physical therapist. So academics has always been important to me. My mom was a school teacher, my dad was a pharmacist, so I was kind of raised that way. So I know that most of our guys aren't going to play pro, and it's important that they have something to fall back on. So our three non-negotiables: number one's going to class, is non-negotiable. The expectation through the recruiting process, the transparency, and then making them understand, like, hey, you're expected to go to class. It's non-negotiable. The second thing is their attitude, and the third thing is their actions. And that covers a broad range, right? But it's like, don't blame, don't complain, don't deflect. Take ownership if you make a mistake. Be positive. We talk all the time about, hey, look, you're going to have a bad moment. You can't let that bad moment make a bad day. And that's about the response and fighting through adversity. And then really your actions, right? You control all three: going to class, attitude, actions. And so we really talk about that. And probably one of the most proud things as a head coach, when I got the job, there were three guys that were like 99.9% of the academic report: missed class, late class, missed tutor, late tutor, disrespect tutor. And one of them was one of the best players returning. And they were all quick conversations, and those three guys weren't in our program year one. So when you do something like that and you set the expectation and the other guys see it, right, that there's a consequence, then it kind of perks everyone up. So we went through 10 weeks of in class before the pandemic hit and everything went virtual. And in that 10-week span, we didn't have one guy miss a class or miss a tutor. And as a coach, you're kind of waiting on it to happen so you can kind of set the tone and give a consequence, a disciplinary action to kind of make everyone understand, like, this is important. But when that's one of your foundations and something you preach and part of your culture, like, it becomes habit and normal. And it goes back to competing in the classroom, everything you do. So we take pride in that.
I'm curious, a few things, but the first one is, like, have you ever connected it for your players that, look, if you're not a pain in my butt, I'm a better coach for you, and that it helps me become a better coach for you when you take care of the things that you should take care of?
Yeah, I think it goes back to high character guys. There was a situation here recently where we could have got a really good transfer, and it wasn't a great fit culturally. Right, would have been our best player, probably one of our top two players, but it wasn't worth it to bring that in. And I think as a coach, right, well, I call guys, like, we don't want to coach wheelbarrows. Guys, you got to push all the time. And when you have to coach the attitude and the effort, it's taken away from everything else, that you have to put your attention and energy to. And, kids are going to make mistakes, right? That's 18 to 22 years old. That's part of college, part of being a teacher and an educator and mentor and a coach. And those are the teachable moments and making them understand what's right, what's wrong. But I think when you don't have to deal with all the external stuff, it makes everything so much easier. It makes coming to practice fun, right? When you're around good kids and they're working hard and winning's hard, right? And making 13 guys happy is really hard because you can only play 5 at a time. Most coaches play maybe 7, 8 guys. And if you don't have good kids, that can become a problem. And winning helps, right? And throughout the course of the year, I'd watch, these TV tapes, and everyone was talking about our bench, the energy level, the enthusiasm. And when you have a winning program like that, it's a lot easier. But what do you do when you're losing, right? Do you have that same energy and that same mojo? Are you complaining because you're not playing? So I think it goes back to, trying to recruit high character kids, that love the game and, serious about their degree.
I love that wheelbarrow analogy. That's great. And the other question I've really enjoyed asking coaches is, especially when we talk about this recruiting piece a little bit, because I believe it helps direct high school coaches in terms of how they phrase things to players or development coaches. And it's this concept of you want to recruit guys who love the game. How do you assess that as a coach when you go and recruit a player?
Yeah, I think the first thing is you ask them what their ultimate goal is, right? And most of them are going to say play pro, whether it's NBA or overseas. So it's like, here's your goal right here, right? You're starting right here. It's not a linear deal. It's not a straight line. There's going to be prosperity happen and adversity happen. How do you handle the adversity? How do you handle prosperity? And that goes back to the E+R=O, your response to positivity. And it's like, okay, now what's your attitude? What are your actions? Here are your goals, right? If you're working out every other day, or you're staying up late, or going out to the bars, or not watching film, your actions are right here. Your goals are right here. They don't match. So you either got to change your goals or change your actions, right? So a lot of kids don't know, right? And we always talk about, hey, be a pro's pro on the court, be a pro's pro off the court. And you have to give them examples. And we try to do a lot of articles, right? The NBA articles, the positives of sleep, right? The Boston Celtics did their sleep study, and sometimes they stay the night so they can get a better sleep instead of flying out at 2 a.m. and getting to a hotel at 4 a.m. So we try to give them articles on hydration, right? How to take care of your body, the importance of, and really just educating our guys, so we can sit there and say, hey, look, here's what the Celtics do, here's what the Nuggets do. And we even showed them an article on coffee, right? When Myers Leonard was at Portland, 45 minutes before every game, they get their French drip, press coffee and drink it, and the benefits of the stimulant, So we really try to educate them on how to be a pro, right? What the importance of sleep, hydration, recovery, taking care of your body, then what you put in nutritionally. So, it's an education. And I think the more you educate, the more they know, and they're going to deviate at some point, but then you kind of go back to say, hey, what were your goals? You want to be a pro, right? You want to be a all league player. Well, your actions right now, you're showing up right before practice. You're not coming early. You're not getting prepared. All the things that go into winning. And it's not just 3 to 6 every day in practice. It's what you do at night, sleeping, what you put in your body for breakfast. Do you sleep until 1? So there's a lot that goes into it.
And the reality is, I'm curious at your level and many levels that coaches coach in college. Some players during their career with you will realize that they're probably not going to play pro. And how do you change that conversation for them in terms of, hey, be the best basketball player you can be, but we're still going to prepare you for your future after the fact?
Yeah, which is fine, right? Not everyone wants to be a pro, which is fine. But now it goes back to what's your role, right? You have to be a star at your role. You still have to be a great teammate. You might play 8 minutes a game one night, 4 minutes the next, 15 minutes the next. And I think mentally for kids, it's tough because I call them the externals, right? And this is more prevalent probably at the high major level where everyone thinks they're going to be in the NBA, where uncle, aunt, AAU coach, high school coach, brother, whoever, is telling the kid, you're not getting enough shots. Chris isn't passing you the ball. Jeff isn't better than you, shouldn't be playing over. So now they got all these negative things going in their head. Well, as a coach, you're trying to get 13 guys on the same page to win a goal, to win a championship, and have one common goal. And I remember when we played Wisconsin in 2012, we got beat by like 20 some points, got smacked. And we come back and Thad has a meeting with them. And he's kind of like, hey, look, I can't be the 8th person you're listening to. I know I'm not going to be 1 or 2, but I can't be number 8, right? And if that happens, right, where I'm not the 8th person, we'll get a chance to be pretty good, because I think there's so many external factors and so many distractions now for these young people, where the ability to focus, right, and understand why we're doing, and getting guys to understand when the team wins, the individual wins, right? The further you go in the tournament, the more exposure you're going to get, the higher you can raise your draft status. You win the league, you're going to have a player of the year, you're going to have a couple first team guys. But it's such a tough situation to guide, where you can't control what uncle, aunt, brother, cousin, AAU high school coach says, and you gotta have that relationship and try to make them understand, be a great teammate. Here's what we want to do, how to do it. And, coaching is different now, last 5-10 years than it is, 10, 15 years ago.
Coach, just so much great phrasing. I can't thank you enough for sharing it. And I have to say, I noticed your sweatshirt there. So can you explain that?
Yeah, so it's something, a design that I came up with. And I think, coaching now, especially in the world that we live in with all this social injustice happening, one of my former players, D'Angelo Russell, was back at a protest and a rally in Louisville, and he had a T-shirt on. It was a 502 for the area code of Louisville, and the 0 was a fist. And I kind of got the idea to create a logo for my team, and all I wanted to do was make 25 T-shirts. And so I came up with this design here, and within 10 minutes, Taylor Rhodes came up with a graphic. And I said, that's perfect. That's awesome. So I go to a guy that's going to make me 25 T-shirts. And he said, hey, you need to sell this T-shirt. I'm like, I don't want to sell it. I want 25 for my team. And he's like, no, this is fire. You got to sell this. And he goes, look, I'll put the T-shirt up, and I'll put the labor and printing up. Whatever's after that, the proceeds you can, keep. And I said, well, I don't want to make one penny off of it. So it took me about a month to figure out where I wanted to donate the proceeds. And I came up with the idea to the Ohio University Ebony Bobcat Network Scholarship Fund for minorities on campus. And so the proceeds, for the T-shirts, the hats, and the sweatshirts that have sold are going towards a scholarship. And I think about 3 weeks ago, we have a $19,500 check, going towards this scholarship for the Ebony Bobcat Network. And it turned out awesome. And I would have been happy to make $100 off of it. I had no idea where it would end up, but it's going to a great cause, and I'm a little biased, but I think it's a pretty cool design.
It's very cool design. And for coaches that can't see, if they're listening to this podcast, I'll share it on Twitter so you can see it. But it's 2 fists, a black and a white fist, and then high in the middle, and it looks tremendous, Coach.
Yeah, there's a website for it. It's called ohioimpact.com, ohioimpact.com, and it's for a great cause. And I enjoy wearing it out in public, and people come up to me saying, man, I love your T-shirt or sweatshirt, where'd you get it? And you tell them the whole story, and they're like, oh man, I'm gonna buy one. And but obviously I appreciate your time and all that you do, not only for coaches, but the game. I think you're building on your brand, which is awesome, and I'm a big fan.
Oh, thank you so much, Coach, and thanks for sharing the game with us.